Welcome to our Marketing to Engineers webcast, New Survey Data, Identifying Content Needs Along the Engineer's Buyer's Journey and Preferences for Webcasts, sponsored by CFE Media. To get the best results from the webcast platform, please make note of the following as you participate in today's event. If you are having technical problems with audio or the slide presentation, click on the question mark at the top right-hand corner of your screen to bring up a list of system checks to make before escalating to an online technician. If you are experiencing issues with your slides or audio, please refresh your browser or click the Refresh Media button directly under the presenter's headshot. You can control the volume settings of this webcast by adjusting the volume on your computer or by adjusting the volume on the webcast platform. If you need a technician, type a message into the Ask a Question box, and someone will get to you as quickly as possible. Individual technical questions will be answered in the Answered Questions on the left-hand side of your screen. You can use the Ask a Question box on the left side of your screen to type questions for the speakers during the presentation for the Q&A session at the end. You may ask questions at any time during this presentation, and we'll get to as many as time allows. Questions that are for today's presenters will be answered verbally during the Q&A session at the end of the webcast. To download the presentation slides, use the Event Resources on the left-hand side of your screen. This webcast is being recorded, including the Q&A session, and we'll send you an email message with a link to the archived version after it's ready. Today's webcast is brought to you by CFE Media and Content Stream. Content Stream is a content marketing software platform that helps marketers feed the content beast. By delivering professionally developed, engineer-centric content directly to a marketer's website, Content Stream will enhance your content portfolio and position your company as a thought leader and resource in the engineering marketplace. By combining third-party content with real-time analytics, persona mapping, and lead generation, Content Stream is a complete content marketing solution for the modern marketer. I'm now happy to introduce today's distinguished speakers. As Director of Content Marketing Solutions, Lynch strives to collaborate with CFE Media's marketing partners to help them build successful content marketing campaigns for targeted engineering audiences. UC Marketing Engineers Research and Content Stream solutions are built on proprietary insight and professionally developed content from CFE Media brands and content partners. By focusing the content on the manufacturing, commercial construction, and industrial automation markets, the content marketing solutions Lynch provides help those companies trying to target the consulting engineer, plant engineer, and controls engineer. Sean Callahan has been a professional writer for more than 20 years. As part of the LinkedIn Marketing Solutions content team, Sean contributes to the LMS blog and writes guides to help B2B marketers do their jobs better. With Russell Glass, head of product from LinkedIn Marketing Solutions, Sean co-authored the book, The Big Data-Driven Business, How to Use Big Data to Win Customers, Beat Competitors, and Boost Profits. Prior to joining LinkedIn, Sean was an editor, marketing director at Bizzo, and he joined Bizzo after spending most of his career as an editor and journalist at Crane Communications, Geezer Jock Media, and the Daily Southtown. Sean has been a freelance journalist writing for publications such as the New York Times, SportsIllustrated.com, Salon.com, Notre Dame Magazine, Chicago Tribune, Chicago Sun-Times, and Washington Post. Sean has also published 5 children's books with more on the way. Before we continue, please take a moment to remind yourself about dealing with technical issues during the presentation. And now we'll hear from Patrick Lynch.
Thanks, Kristen. Well, good afternoon, everybody. We're here today to talk about the latest research from our Marketing Engineers program. This survey was conducted for 10 days in February of 2015. During that 10-day data collection process, we had a little more than 1,000 responses to our marketing engineer survey. The participants were offered an incentive of a $50 gift card, and the primary source of the responses came from our three media brands, Control Engineering, Consulting Specifying Engineer, and Plant Engineering magazines. Moving on to the next slide, you'll see the respondent profile of the types of engineers who took our survey for this round. The job function is pretty consistent with all of our other research, which has been these participants are engineers. They work in engineering and management. The typical size of these engineers' companies that they work at was all across the board, but the average was 86 employees. And for their current age, the average was about 48 years old, which is pretty consistent with all the data we have about our engineering audience. Moving on to the research, this question has been a question that we've asked across all of our marketing engineers research studies. We've asked the engineers that when they begin their content journey, when they're starting to look for information about the latest engineering technologies, trends, or products, we ask them where they start that journey. And it's been consistent across all of our research studies that the engineers start with search engines. They come to the supplier-vendor websites, and they visit trade publication magazines or trade publication websites. This is where the engineers begin their search. They view those sources as the top sources for engineering-related information. As you can see at kind of the bottom of the chart there, that they don't begin with social media as a top source. Doesn't mean that they don't go to social media as a source for good content, but as you can tell, search engines, supplier websites, and trade publications are where the engineers begin their journey. Within those content sources, we ask the engineers to identify what are the most valuable content types. Once again, very consistent with the previous research studies we've conducted, the engineers, whether they be a consulting specifying engineer, an industrial automation controls engineer, or a plant engineer, they all need product information. Product information, data sheets, specification sheets are always at the top of the valuable content type list. As you move down the list, you can see that white papers, best practices articles, how-to articles, trade publication articles, case studies. These are the types of content that the engineers need when it comes to, I would say, researching a new product solution or a case study about how another engineer has solved a problem in the industry. As you see at the bottom of the list, the engineers don't presently see blogs as a number one or very valuable content type. It doesn't mean that they can't find good information there. We've just seen in our data over the research studies that the engineers don't believe that blogs sometimes contain that technical source of information or the kind of the technical credibility when it comes to the content they're looking for to help them do their job better. But we know that sometimes an engineer will read a blog if they see it as, you know, a resource center or maybe a perspective from a subject matter expert. So sometimes it's almost just what's in the name of the blog center that you might have. So before I advance to the next slide, I know our guest speaker today, Sean Callahan, he had a couple thoughts on this slide, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Sean now.
All right, thanks, Pat. Yeah, I had a comment on this slide and the previous slide. I think it's interesting that blogs are so low, but I probably should find it alarming since I contribute to a blog. But I think that blogs are a gateway to the other product, like product data sheets and stuff that are on this list. Blogs are, the way that engineers can get to this deeper kind of information that they crave, I think, when they're going through their buyer's journey. And the previous slide 9, where we talked about, the top thing that where engineers are looking for product information is through search, and I don't think that's surprising to anybody, and it really confirms how the buyer's journey has changed, that engineers and other B2B buyers can go through using Google or Bing or whatever search engine they like and research anonymously without contacting a salesperson, at least early in the process, and self-educate, and so they're prepared to talk to a salesperson. I also thought it was really interesting that vendor information and trade publication information, sort of first-party and objective third-party information are almost equally valuable to the engineers, and I think that's kind of the way it's always been. It's more prominent now that we're in a sort of content marketing age, but engineers have always craved brochures and that kind of information from the vendor, in addition to getting that kind of third-party objective viewpoint of a trade publication. So thanks for letting me chime in there, Pat. Back to you.
Thanks, Sean. Yeah, I think it's valuable insight to say that the content over the buyer's journey, the content marketing journey, continues to evolve. I think all of our participants on the webcast here today would admit that the content marketing buzz has taken a hold in everybody's industry, and I know, Sean, you're going to talk a little bit more about that in greater detail, but I think it's constantly evolving, and we like to think that this research provides an insight into just a snapshot of where the engineers are spending their time, where they see valuable sources of content or good information. And within this research study, as we've done in previous formats, we wanted to take a deeper dive into one of the content channels that I know as a company, CFE Media, we produce over 50 webcasts per year. If you've participated with one of our webcasts in the past, you know that our team does a great job putting together the information, assembling the learning objectives, and we know as a company that webcasts are a great source of information for the engineers. It's a great way to drive awareness of a solution. It's great when it comes down to educating the engineers on a particular issue. But we know at CFE Media that our webcasts, when they're accredited, we wanted to figure out that if an engineer was going to attend one of our webcasts, we wanted to know how much time would they spend with an accredited versus a non-accredited webcast. And we define an accredited webcast as one of our editorial webcasts that we can provide continuing education unit credits or professional development hours to the engineers who attend those webcasts and take an exam, a learning exam, at the end of the webcast. So when asked, how long are you willing to watch a webcast, the engineers told us that they would spend 47 minutes with an accredited webcast and only 29 minutes with a non-accredited webcast. And those numbers, I won't say were shocking to us as a CFE Media team. And the way that we interpret this is that an engineer knows that a webcast is on-demand content. We heard in a lot of our research that the engineers want those webcasts stored and archived so they can kind of view them on their own schedule. But we also know that from a value perspective, if an engineer can tie in educational units with their webcast, with their valuable time to spend on that webcast, we know that that's a pretty good recipe for success. Moving on to how many webcasts the engineers would attend and whether or not they'd be willing to pay for a webcast. You can see there on the left-hand side of the screen that the engineers are more likely to attend 4 webcasts per year versus only 3 for non-accredited. This goes back to kind of my statement on the previous slide that the engineers are willing to attend the non-accredited webcast, and we'll get into what the engineers see as the most valuable components of a webcast. But as you could tell from the left-hand side, the engineers are open to the idea of attending a webcast, and on the right-hand side you see that the engineers are actually willing to pay to attend a 60-minute accredited webcast. Now, as you can tell, we put some very specific qualifiers on that question. The webcast has to be 60 minutes. It has to be accredited. But you can see from the breakdown that on average, The engineers would be willing to pay almost $40 for a webcast, to attend a webcast that they viewed as accredited and educational in nature. Moving on to the next slide about the valuable webcast components. As I mentioned, our webcasts at CFE Media, we have the opportunity to accredit those webcasts and give out continuing education units. As you can see at the top of the list here, the engineers say that continuing education is the #1 most valuable webcast component, followed closely by codes and standards, product information, case studies. These are the types of things that our engineers want to see when they attend our webcasts. At the bottom of the list, you can see testimonials. We've run into this in the past, with our webcast group here at CFE Media, where testimonials are brought up as a potential webcast topic, and it's interesting to see that from the engineers who participated in this survey that testimonials were seen as the least valuable webcast component compared with the rest of these. And then finally, the verbatims. We asked the engineers who participated, in general, how would you improve these webcasts? We asked them, if you were going to look at, improving the webcast, they responded with answers like, the information must be technical and supported with success stories. They appreciate the on-demand aspect, which I mentioned earlier, of these webcasts. I know that we archive our webcasts for up to 12 months after the webcast is aired, because these engineers need to consume those webcasts kind of as it fits in with their schedule. And as you can tell, that this is pretty consistent with what we've seen with the other slides that we went through about webcasts in regards to if you make them educational, you make them application-based as opposed to something that's a testimonial that could be seen as opinion-based. I think that's a pretty good recipe for webcast success. And before I move on to my final section, I wanted to turn it over to Sean again, because I know he had some thoughts on these webcast slides.
Yeah, thanks, Pat. I just had one really quick thing to say. I think there's a huge lesson here for marketers, especially, again, when it comes to content marketing like a webcast. The engineers really want that detailed technical information, and you really can't go wrong if you're providing them with helpful, detailed information. And that's something to remember, not only for webcasts, but for any kind of content you're creating. Just be helpful, and they're craving information. So that's it. Back to you, Pat.
Thanks, Sean. So my final section of my research here today is on purchasing and specifying behavior. We know that our engineering community that we serve on a daily basis at CFE Media, they're constantly researching and working on both large and small-scale projects. So we went out and asked the engineers, how many months in advance do you begin researching new engineering products, technologies, or services? And, if this was a consumer-based webcast and we were talking about research from a consumer market, the number of months in advance might be a little bit less. As we've seen with our engineering audience, they're very thorough in their research. And as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, for large-scale projects, the engineers are going to start their research process about 8 months in advance. So this has been interpreted when we've been out and spoke with some of our supplier partners out there. They've actually interpreted this slide as attaching to the end of their buy or specification cycle. So it might, for example, if your buy or spec cycle is 12 months, they've interpreted this slide to say, for large-scale projects, we might be able to add an additional 8 months in advance of that buy specification cycle, because as we've talked about in previous webcasts, the engineers and their access to information, it's unlike ever before. So if they're researching a project, they're going to start it early. They're going to want to see what other engineers are talking about. They're going to want to download case studies, application articles to see, if an engineer has encountered a similar problem in the past, and they're going to use that information in their buy or specified decision. As you can see on the right-hand side, even smaller scale projects, they're going to start about 3 months in advance of the smaller scale projects as well. Moving on to the next slide, we wanted to know that along the buyer's journey, what type of content does an engineer need? If they're going through from a very simple buy cycle from the beginning, towards the beginning, middle, and then towards the end, how does the engineer's content needs change? And as you can see, product information and data sheets, they need those all the way throughout their buy cycle or their spec cycle. They need easy access to product information, spec sheets, data sheets, because that will help them drive their final decision when it comes to their purchase or specification behavior. But as you can see, as you move down the chart through white papers, trade publication articles, case studies, their needs change. As an engineer moves through the process, they're going to need additional information or how-to videos. They might attend a webcast that you host or watch a how-to video that you have on your website to see just one more time how a product works or how you guys might solve their engineering problem. But I think the takeaway for this slide is you need a variety of content at different stages of the buy specified journey. And moving on to the next slide, you can see that when asked, the engineers listed these items as the most important factors to the decision-making process. So the question we asked them is, when you're evaluating a supplier's products, technologies, or services, how important are these individual criteria? Product quality was the #1 item on the list, followed closely by service and support, technical advantage, previous experience with the manufacturer, the reputation. As you can see on this list that we actually don't get to the initial product cost until almost at the bottom of the list here. And what that tells us is that the engineers are willing to work with suppliers who might have a slightly higher priced product or service because they know that if it's their reputation on the line, they want to make sure that the product has high quality, that there's going to be that continual service and support, and the technical superiority of the product. So these are things, from our standpoint that we think this slide is specifically for our supplier partners. We think it's something that, along the way, these suppliers can differentiate themselves, with the messaging about their product and also how you position your product information on your website. My final slide, and then I'll have Sean chime in on my last few slides here, is when they're beginning their buyer or specifier's journey, the engineers typically will be doing this type of research on their own. They're going to be accessing the information off your websites. They're going to be responding to your newsletters. But we ask the engineers what percentage of your buy, specify, evaluation process is complete when you typically reach out and contact a supplier or vendor. As you can see, almost 40% of their process is complete. They've made up their mind. They've made a decision that this product or service is going to be right for them on their next upcoming project. And as you can tell, that the access to information and the ability for an engineer to download case studies or product spec sheets off your website is very important to them because they want to do a lot of this research prior to actually contacting the suppliers. So I know that if this was a consumer research report, it might be something as high as 75 or 90% of the process has been decided. So from a supplier perspective and kind of in our industrial and commercial construction world, the engineers are ultimately making their decision, but they want your help. They want you to be out there, conversing with them, talking with them about your products and services. But as you can tell, this data, kind of what we went through, that they have a very elaborate purchasing and specifying process, and as they move along that journey, they want to make sure that they have the right type of information, that they can access that information off your website as quickly and easily as possible, and if they need to contact you, they want to talk about the high quality of your product and the technical superiority of it, not so much the cost always right up front. So Right before I, kind of close my portion and turn it over to Sean, I know Sean wanted to chime in on these last couple research slides of mine. So, Sean?
Yeah, thanks, Pat. That was great stuff. I'm gonna move into my portion of the presentation and talk a little bit about how these two relate. The information you were presenting from your research and the information that was included in the book I wrote with Russ Glass called The Big Data Driven Business. And so I think the critical thing is that the buyer's journey has changed, and there's, wild estimates about how much time buyers are spending on their own, self-educating anonymously, where the marketer doesn't have direct access to, or the salesperson doesn't have direct access to the prospect when they're going through this process of doing the self-education, researching online. But at the same time, there are ways that marketers can watch and stay in contact with prospects even as they're remaining anonymous. You can use a pixel on your website, for instance, that can enable you to figure out, what the job title is of the person coming there, what industry they're from, what size company they're with, and this can help you direct them to the proper information on your website. And this kind of thing, you can also tell by their behavior on your website. If someone who bounces, you would treat differently than someone who goes deeper into the website and looks at deep product information. Obviously, one is better than the other. So I wanted to, talk about this idea that the buyer's journey has changed. Buyers and prospects are remaining anonymous longer, but marketers, through data and the ability to watch prospects as they go through the funnel, enables marketers to have a leg up in that 40 to 90% of the buyer's journey where the buyer is remaining anonymous. So anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in my presentation. As it was mentioned before, I'm a content guy at LinkedIn. I write for our LinkedIn Marketing Solutions blog. And what I'm going to talk about today is the rise of the data-driven, customer-focused business. I think the best businesses going forward will be marketing-driven, and they will be focused on the customer, and they will be using data to communicate with both customers and prospects. I'm going to say data a lot in this presentation. The over and under is probably about 75, 80 mentions. But first, I've got 10 eye-popping stats about big data and how it's changing the world of the marketer and the B2B buyer. The first stat here is 2.5 quintillion. That's the number of bytes of data created every day across the globe. That's an IBM stat. The next big data is 90. That's the percentage of existing data that has been created in the past 2 years. That figure may even be getting higher as data is just continually produced every day, every minute, every second. 1,000 is the next statistic I've got here. That's how many times faster the microprocessor in your smartphone is compared with the Apollo 11's launch computer. Just processing speeds are so much quicker. And 6, that's the number of hours it takes the NSA to collect the amount of data contained in the Library of Congress. So the NSA can collect up to 4 Library of Congresses every single day. They have the capability to do that, although I don't know what the Senate has decided just yet on the Patriot Act. And 2.8 million, that's the factor by which the cost of storing a gigabyte of data declined between 1980 and 2009, and that has enabled some new business models and some very, very intriguing new ways that marketers can reach their customers. And 60 million, this is the amount in dollars by which the Obama campaign boosted its fundraising by using simple big data technique of A/B testing, and I'll go into a little bit more detail about that later in this presentation. And 90, that is the percentage of the buyer's journey completed by the time a prospect reaches out to a salesperson. That's according to Forrester, and that's a pretty robust estimate. CFE Media's data said that it was about 39 to 40% for engineers in the process. The 90 is probably for a little bit less complicated product specification process. And 43,000. This is a marketer, and this is the variations of a display ad, the combinations that they used to optimize a client's campaign performance. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about that too. But they used, they call it dynamic display, and they were able to, by analyzing the reaction and the sales based on these ads, the various combinations based on different photo, different size, different headline, different call to action, 43,000 different combinations. They were able to hone in on the best 10 or so to drive results. And at 81, and that's the percentage of large tech companies who have a chief marketing technologist, which speaks to the way that marketing has become very technology-oriented and data-driven. There's definitely a right brain and left brain thing going on in marketing these days. And the last of these big data stats is 5, which is the percentage of executives surveyed by Accenture who said that big data would fundamentally change their business. And I believe that the other 95 just haven't realized that big data has already changed their business and will probably change it more in the future. So we live in an age of data. I think the kind of Jetsons thing that we used to watch when we were kids is coming true to a certain degree. Not that you're going to get the pancakes that you want coming out of your own kitchen, but that marketers can serve their customers and prospects the exact information they're looking for if they use data and they understand who their customer is and their behavior and how that indicates or gives a pretty strong indication of what it is that they want to read. And this is all driven by the computer age and the internet age. It's driven by Moore's Law. The number of transistors on a computer chip will double approximately every 2 years. That is continuing to happen, and it has created a world of big data where there's just simply so much data being thrown off so fast by all of these devices, whether it's a laptop or an iPad or an iPhone. The amount of data out there is kind of staggering as we went through in some of those statistics. And Jeffrey Moore, not Gordon Moore, a different kind of Moore, he wrote Crossing the Chasm and Inside the Tornado and several other kind of really important books about technology marketing. He says, as the quote up there indicates, big data is the most disruptive business force there is. Big data is the stuff that is really moving economic power from one group to another. And there are a handful of examples. I'm going to use 3 where a company, an upstart using data, came in and really drove a very established company out of business, and it was based in large part on data. And Amazon is and its battle with Borders was a critical one. Amazon, they're known as an e-commerce company, but they're also a data company. They know, and the customer experience is just phenomenal on Amazon. They know what you've bought before. They know what people like you have bought. They know what you've looked at and what you're interested in. And the customer experience when you go to the website reflects that. They're able, with their recommendation engine, which is uncanny in its ability to recommend the products that you're interested in, they were able to put Borders on the ropes in very short order. And I think data was a critical aspect of that. Similar with Google and AltaVista and the other search engines that Google took on when it started a little bit more than a decade ago. Google understood that storage was incredibly cheap, and they built their whole technology around storage. They were able to store basically the entire web and crawl it. And that kind of search just was leaps and bounds above AltaVista and the others. And that approach enabled Google to, quickly become the de facto search engine and a new verb. And Netflix, again, it seems like that's a distribution model that made it different than Blockbuster. And in fact, Netflix founder was inspired by a bad trip to Blockbuster where he owed a lot of money for a late movie. And he developed the new distribution method of bringing CDs and videos to people via mail. But what really separates Netflix is its ability to know what its customers want. It used to be from the queue. Now it's from direct watching on video, the streaming video, that Netflix knows what its customers want. They can recommend other movies. They can even choose to produce their own content. House of Cards is a good example, and they were able to really understand that its customers, what they wanted. And they used big data to determine that House of Cards was going to be a hit, and they were exactly right. So those companies are now Goliaths, but at one time they were Davids, and as Brian Carden here, who's the CMO of Lattice Engine, said, you can really be David to the big companies Goliath by leveraging data effectively. And this, data and marketing has always kind of suffered from a lack of data, and this is a famous quote that sort of describes the advertiser's lament. Half the money I spend on advertising is wasted. The trouble is I don't know which half. But nowadays, marketers and advertisers are getting a much better handle on what's working and what's not. If you I think the arc of the show that just ended with Don Draper, Mad Men. In the very first episode, Don is positioned as kind of almost a savant, a creative savant. He's able to come up with this idea at the end of the show and save this account. It's toasted when he had spent the show throwing research in the trash, etc. And that was sort of the old model, that it was a creative insight, creative inspiration that drove the advertising business. But also later in the show's arc, the IBM 360 came in, and it really made the old guard nervous. But it's also really symbolic of where advertising is going. There's really a merger of the right brain and left brain kind of thinking, and data and creativity are working together hand in hand. And so now I'm going to talk a little bit about a few companies that have used data, and marketing is really sitting on top of this treasure trove of data, as Glenn Gall says here. Marketing understands who their customers are. They have insight into it not only by who their current customers are, but who the prospects are coming to the website and what they're doing there. They can also track, with the right technology, how customers are behaving on social media, on review sites, etc., and you can have a really kind of 360-degree view of who the customer is. And we've got I've got some fairly quick case studies that show how some marketing organizations are already using data to boost their performance. Earlier in the presentation, I mentioned this example of the Obama campaign using A/B testing to raise an extra $60 million in funds in the 2008 campaign. And what happened was on the front page of the Obama for America website, they were testing various combinations of videos, photographs, and calls to action. And the team really thought that this one video was going to perform excellently well, but they went through the A/B testing anyway, and they found that one particular piece of one particular one of the combinations of the call to action and the photographs and everything performed much better than the rest. And the funny part of this story is that the one that they thought was going to be the hands-down winner actually performed the worst. But the one that performed the best, over the average, led to an extra $60 million in fundraising for the campaign based on the number of emails it generated, which when they got an email, they were able to generate a certain number of dollars, and that's the way they calculated this capability to raise this extra $60 million. And it was all done through some very simple big data-driven A/B testing. I also mentioned earlier the live ads, which you see their logo here, and they use data to optimize display ads. For a retailer, they used, as I mentioned, more than 43,000 different combinations of ads. They call it dynamic display. They looked at various, colors in the ads, photos in the ads, various copy, various calls to action, various headlines. And as the ads went through, they were able to figure out which ones were performing best and stick with those ads. And it delivers incredible performance. It delivered 461% ROI versus 109% ROI for just the static ads. And again, this is using big data to make some marketing perform better than it may have in the past. Juniper Networks is a company that makes routers, and they use predictive analytics to really home in on prospects who are ready to buy now, not just prospects who may be ready to buy sometime in the future, ready to buy now. And so using a company called Lattice Engines, which uses predictive modeling, they look at online and offline data, and they put that all together to figure out what are the common characteristics of companies that are buying routers. And one of the key things that they found was that the prospects who were ready to buy now were those who had signed a lease for new office space within the next 90 days, because those are the people who are able to, they need new routers. They're moving into new space. They need new routers. And so Juniper has really jumped on that data and helped their sales team. CSC is a Computer Sciences Corporation, and they use data to bridge the gap between marketing and sales. We all know that marketing and sales historically have had some kind of a rocky relationship, let's call it. And the idea is that the leads that marketing delivers to sales are sometimes not what sales wants. And by sitting down together and using a marketing automation system, CSC was able to help, sales and marketing sat down together as they installed the system, and they were able to define what a good lead looked like. Both marketing and sales agreed, and when marketing is able to deliver that to sales, the relationship improves and sales do improve too. Dell is another example of a company that used data to really become a powerhouse, and Dell did it even before some of the latest advances. They did it as one of the first e-commerce companies, and they were able to outmaneuver Compaq back in more than a decade ago by being able, through e-commerce, to know what products and what features were really appealing to the customer. And they were able then to, using a low amount of inventory, adjust on the fly and build computers that had those pieces, like a CD burner, for instance. Back in the day, Dell was able to really outmaneuver Compaq using data. And its e-commerce approach was at the heart of that. DocuSign is another company that's a really forward-thinking, data-driven marketer. They use measurement and attribution better than almost anyone out there. And what they really are able to do using their marketing automation system is to kind of answer John Wanamaker's question about which half of their advertising is not working. And when it's not working, they cut that out. If a certain email program or process was not working, they cut that and doubled down on the email or campaign that is performing well. And they have very, very strong performance based on this approach. And Eloqua is a marketing automation company that has recently been bought by Oracle. They're a SaaS company, and they were able to generate powerful customer insight and product improvement because they were a SaaS company, they're able to look at, what elements of the product their customers are using and which they're not, and then get rid of the ones they're not and really focus on improving the ones that the customers are using, that are working, that are providing value. And ultimately, that worked. It led to a 30% increases in renewal rates for Eloqua and an industry-leading product, and ultimately a sale to Oracle. The company that I used to work for, Bizzo, was also a company that used data to really improve sales and improve marketing's relationship with sales. One of the key things that we found in our looking at our data was that it was larger companies with more than 50 employees that were the most likely to buy our solution. And so in the lead process, we stripped out those companies that had less than 50 employees and did not pass them along to sales. And the result was a much stronger ability for sales to go after the leads and not spend a lot of time trying to qualify leads after marketing had supposedly qualified them. And it was a huge growth in revenue, more than 80% a year. So in getting near concluding here, Accenture has done some research on big data. Not every business is really getting a handle on big data, and their survey found that only 37% of the respondents said big data's primary impact was on customer relationships. And I really believe that's where big data is going to be central. And only 5% said big data's primary impact was to fundamentally change the way we do business. But I think, whether you're on the phone, whether you're staying at a hotel, whether you're, on a website, if a company can understand what your needs are and deliver them to you, you are going to be much more inclined to use that company in the future. And so we find there are a lot of questions about big data. Primarily, how do I, perhaps as a small company, implement big data principles in my own business? And I've got 5 principles that I talk about. One is determine what you want to know about your customer. That's first and foremost. And you can do that not only by looking at who's coming to your website with the piece of the pixel or the lightweight code that I described before. You can tell who's coming to your website, what they're interested in. You can also tell their demographics, what industry they're in, what their job title is, what size company they're at. And if you are able to figure out who your customers are, and more importantly, who your best customers are, it can go a long way to figuring out who your best prospects are. Principle number 2 is start small by thinking big data and little triggers. And again, if you can find sort of one element about your current customers that your best customers have in common, like Lattice Engines was able to help Juniper find out that, people who had bought, signed a lease for office space in the next 90 days, those were the ones who are most likely to buy. That kind of data is out there, and it's in your systems now. Principle number 3 is invest in technology. This stuff works. You don't have to go hog wild, but CRM systems are a must. I'm sure most of you have those. Marketing automation is becoming a must. Analytics tools, many of them are free, are no-brainer. And using these kind of tools, you can get a better understanding of both who your customers are and who your prospects ought to be. And principle number 4 is hire the right people. Marketers have traditionally hired creatives, people who are right-brained, but the left brain folks, the data-oriented people, the math people, those need to be in your plans. And principle number 5 is, test what you're doing, measure what you're doing, and optimize what you're doing. If you're able to do that, you can, spend less on marketing and certainly spend on the stuff that's working. So this Moore's Law is not stopping. It's going to continue. Marketing is going to continue to reap the benefits of this. As Peter Drucker said, this is one of my favorite quotes, business has only 2 functions, marketing and innovation. And we think both of them will be led by the CMO and the marketing department going forward. So that's it. I'm going to pass it back to Kristen for some Q&A. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Pat and Sean. That was a terrific presentation. Are you both ready to take on some questions from the audience?
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Great. Please type your questions for today's presenters in the Ask a Question box on your screen. We will get to as many questions as we can. Questions will be answered verbally during this Q&A session. Within a few days, this presentation will be available for on-demand viewing, and we will send you an email message with the link connecting directly to it. Questions that we do not get to today will be posted online at marketingtoengineersblog.com with the archived version of this webcast. As a reminder, the first 100 people who attended this webcast live will receive a copy of Sean's book, The Big Data-Driven Business, How to Use Big Data to Win Customers, Beat Competitors, and Boost Profits. As our presenters prepare for the Q&A, please take a look at the list of Marketing to Engineers resources. All resources are linked from the PDF of this presentation, which you can download from the Event Resources on the left-hand side of your screen. Now, on to some questions. All right, let's start, Pat, with you first. Let's go with, where do engineers turn to industry news first? Publication websites, social media, what do you think they do first?
It's a good question, and we've heard this one in the past, and we've covered it in the research. But I think the short answer is that the engineers, as we saw in the research, they're starting their content search off with search engines. But specifically for the folks on the line, they are tending to go to supplier vendor websites. They're also coming to our trade publication websites. But as you'll see in our next research study that is coming out from Marketing Engineers, we do a deeper dive for the engineers' preferences about specifically supplier websites. So we ask them what are their preferences for navigation, for number of clicks it takes to get to the content. But for the sake of this question, I think we've seen that the engineers that when they start their journey, if they will, they're typically starting with the search engines, the trade publications, or media websites, and they're also going to the supplier websites as well. So probably those 3 spots is where they begin their content journey, and then the content needs, as we saw in terms of the variety of content, typically changes throughout their journey. So, Sean, I don't know if you wanted to weigh in on that one, or Kristen, if we have a separate question for Sean.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that one. My sense of that is that you really can't pinpoint one place where engineers or any B2B buyers are going. I think they have so many options across the web, offline, online. What you really need to do is try and be present as often as you can where they are. You want to do full funnel marketing where you're generating awareness at the top of the funnel. Because these buying processes, as we saw in the research earlier, take so long. I mean, sometimes some people were saying they take longer than 18 months, and you need to be present at the top of the funnel and in the mid-funnel and the lower funnel as they're sort of moving down this process. You need to get your message in front of them as often as you can. and it's hard to pick one spot where they're going to be because they're going to be everywhere. It's why marketing is so complicated right now.
Great. Thanks, guys. Next question. What type of data do engineers need to make a decision? For example, is ROI still the most important?
Sean, you wanna take that one to start, and then I have a few thoughts, just so we can all.
Yeah, I don't specifically know much about engineers, but I do know how all the research that I see on how people are buying is that they want vendor information, they want third-party information, and despite taking so much of the buying journey being anonymous and self-educating, they really do value the salesperson's input, especially if the salesperson is really adding some valuable information and telling them something new, something that they didn't know before. I think all those things factor into the buying process.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd agree with that, Sean. And for the sake of time, why don't we go ahead, Kristen, and answer a few more of these questions? I can see the questions rolling in. So I know we're coming up near the end of the allotted time. So we'll go ahead and take a couple more questions, or one or two more, and we'll go from there.
Great. Sean, this is directed more towards you. What's an example of helpful content for readers?
Well, I would say the major thing you can do to provide helpful content is do some research on Google and try and figure out what questions your customers are asking. And if they're asking about price, talk about price. If they're asking about value, or have specific questions about the kind of product or solution you're selling, answer those. And then put those on your blog, or create an ebook or a video or something that answers those specific questions that you can determine your audience is asking, and that's the way you can really create helpful content. Just find out what their questions are and answer them as honestly as you can. Try not to push your product too much, but try to be a valuable resource in your industry, and I think that's the way to create the most helpful content.
Pat, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Sean touched on a lot of the key things, the key points for the readers. I think if you can help, whether it be a reader or an engineer, solve a problem that they're encountering in their day, whether it be an engineering problem or a regular consumer problem, I think that engineer or the consumer is more likely to come back to your site, come back and view you, whether it be the supplier or the author, as a good use of their time or a good source of content. So I think Sean touched on.
Great. Thanks, guys. We have time for about one last question. As a reminder, we will post any of the questions that we did not have a chance to get to today on our Marketing to Engineers blog. So a couple people have asked Pat when the next Marketing Engineers research will be live, and also if we are planning on doing anything globally with our Marketing to Engineers research. Mm-hmm. Could you elaborate a little bit more?
Sure. We actually just conducted a research study on, I mentioned it earlier, on website design, website navigation issues, basically what an engineer likes about a supplier's website, what they like about trade publications' websites, how they navigate those sites, how many clicks it takes for them to become annoyed with a website before they leave the website completely and just go find the information elsewhere. We just finished the data collection last week. We're in the process of analyzing that data right now. You should see that data. We should make an announcement for that in the next, I would estimate, 3 weeks before the data analysis and kind of verification is done. And from an international perspective, we are starting to expand our Marketing Engineers brand to our international affiliates. So if you're familiar with CFE Media, you know we have Control Engineering China and Plant Engineering Europe, and we have these affiliates around the globe, and we're going to start to segment our research based on either geographic location or the demographic data as well. So you'll see that later on in 2015 from CFE Media, both from a research perspective and kind of the international, the incorporation of our international colleagues in the research as well. So,
great. Thanks, Pat. Thanks again to our great speakers, Patrick Lynch and Sean Callahan, for sharing their time and expertise today. Now that we're just about done, we want to see how we did. The exit survey will pop up on your screen as soon as this webcast ends. Please take a moment to complete it as we use this information to improve our webcasts and plan for future research studies. On behalf of CFE Media, thanks for attending this webcast. Copyright 2015 CFE Media. This concludes our webcast. Thank you.